Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Welcome to the Performance Matters podcast from GP Strategies, your talent transformation partner. In each episode, we'll interview industry experts and explore best practices and innovative insights to help your organization improve performance. Hi, and welcome back to the Performance Matters podcast, sponsored by GP Strategies, the world's leading talent transformation organization. As my AI intro voice indicated, I am Michael Teal. I am currently the host of the Performance Matters podcast until they decide that AI does a much better job than me. I mean, whenever I listen to that intro on the podcast, I'm like, that guy sounds a lot better than me. Like, he's probably the much more professional, right down the middle version of me. So I am just waiting for the day when I get that knock on my door. But in the meantime, I'm here. I'm excited to talk about all the amazing things happening in the world. You know what? In the past couple of months here, we've been really tuning in on the power of leadership, whether it's leadership and the power of implementing coaching or integrating AI or emotional intelligence. We all know that leadership is the straw that stirs the drink of performance. And today we're going to look at a little different, but equally important version of leadership. And that is the powerful role of DEI. In fact, we're going to call this podcast DEI, the Leadership Essential. And you know how this works, folks. We have been honored, I think, for the past 3 years consecutive by the Marketing Communications or Marcom organization as a gold medal winning industry focused podcast. So you know that it's not me ranting. I am bringing in thought leaders throughout the GP and partnership practice in various expertise. I'm honored today to be joined by learning director and constant disruptor of the norm, someone who translates DEI and leadership priorities into impactful learning strategy. Joining me, and she might be angry when I do this, from Dumfries, Scotland, is Nic Girvan. Nic, how are you today?
Mike, I love that. I'd say you're a little bit on the wrong coast. That's the more an Edinburgh accent.
Thank you for indulging me. Okay, so I've learned from you in the past with DEI, you need to bring your authentic self to work. So I just did right there. Now you might be saying that's a little too authentic, and let's dial it back a little bit. So here's the thing. You are in the DEI world. You live and breathe this, do you not?
I do indeed, yes.
Okay, so I've got some tough questions for you. I know that this has probably been a tough few months for DEI, given the current political climates, and I'm using quotes while doing that for you listeners out there. Given the current political climates and the mixed responses from organizations regarding DEI, Nic, my question to you as a practitioner, what does DEI really look like for businesses over the next few years? So put on your crystal ball here. Tell me, what are your impressions? What's going on? How are you feeling? Spill the tea for me, please.
Oh, well, we are starting with a major question there. We can't do this podcast without acknowledging that DEI is back in the limelight. And that's not all bad. There are some really good things that it's taking center stage for as well. But using the US as an example, what we are seeing is a number of organizations that are eliminating or at least downsizing their DEI efforts. But on the flip side of that, the bit that keeps me hopeful is over the pond and across in Europe, we are seeing a real push in DEI supportive requirements. So there's a massive focus right now on things like accessibility and flexible working validations. So I guess the reassuring constant that I'm seeing across both sides and across the world really is that businesses are remaining committed to DEI. In the US, there was some really interesting research that was published towards the back end of the year, just as everything was getting a little bit more spicy. And that was around executives and how committed they were to DEI. And what the research really stressed was that this was across the political spectrum.
Okay, that's important.
Yes, absolutely. This wasn't a biased poll. It was completely mixed. And what it found was that the majority of executives are still recognizing that inclusive practice is absolutely essential for their business strategy.
What kind of percentage are we talking about in terms of the number? Give me some data on this thing.
The actual number was 82%. So we're not talking a majority of like 52 or 53, that sort of gray area that bounces. 82, which is absolutely huge. And Mike, let me throw another number at you, because we had another piece of research that said 72% of organizations are going to actually be expanding their DEI investment over the next 2 years. So 82, 72, these are big numbers to play with. And that to me is saying that it's not going anywhere. But before I get too confident, and I am going to backtrack a little bit, because you asked what DEI is going to look like for businesses, right? DEI is going to change. Like, it isn't going to be what we've known. It's not just the flag waving at certain times. It's not just the putting out the odd LinkedIn post. Organizations are going to be changing along with the landscape surrounding them. And the language is going to change massively. And we're already seeing this happen. So DEI has kind of become an interesting acronym. Some people are now using it as a weapon. Some people are trying to reclaim the idea of being woke. It's quite a divisive terminology and label. So, what we're starting to see is things like inclusive leadership, workplace engagement, people first strategies. And that is recognizing that DEI and inclusion, that practice is important to our organizations. We're not doing it just because it's nice. This is supporting your talent pipeline. This is reflecting your client base. Organizations are going to find themselves increasingly judged in 2025 if their business decisions, if their senior leadership team aren't representing the people within their service or the service users employing them. So I guess my short answer is that DEI isn't going anywhere. We might label it different. It's still absolutely core, and it's going to move away from HR and go beyond that. And it's going to align more practically as the leadership essential.
Honestly, I really like this transition you're saying is from this almost clinical term of DEI to inclusive leadership or people first strategies. Because at the end of the day, the biggest thing I learned from speaking with you and other of your colleagues within the DEI practice is that this is not performative, right? This is truly getting your hands dirty and looking at ways that you can have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And that was really eye opening for me because I'm a little bit of a cynic. And sometimes when I'd see that, I'd think, oh, people are just putting a little label on it. This is very specific, very tactical, really, truly nitty gritty. And kind of the juice of what I've learned is it's getting in the trenches and getting specific. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question here, Nic, and that would be, what are some of these visible behaviors that leaders might be demonstrating if this is indeed the case?
I think you nailed it straight on. Like, this isn't just about saying, well, I'm inclusive and I care about everybody's opportunities. It is about what people are seeing from you. There are too many instances where many leaders go, well, this is something I'm really passionate about. So, of course, people recognize it, but they're not seeing it translate into what you're doing every day. So, in terms of our behaviors, it starts with being consistent in our inclusion efforts. You have to operate consistently from a place of curiosity and heightened awareness. It's about consistently, and I'm going to carry on saying it, prioritizing inclusion in every process, interaction, relationship. And yes, this does mean getting in the trenches. This means scheduling regular one-to-ones. It is about facilitating meetings inclusively. It's about championing those flexible working opportunities. And one of the things that I think you can really demonstrate in your behavior is when you're challenging your own organization's policies and procedures that aren't aligning with the diverse needs of your workforce. There's so much conversation right now about the return to office agendas, for example. This is a great example of when you can say, is this right for the organization and for our clients? What I would say, though, is that these behaviors get you started and it's what others will see you doing. But culture is bigger than just our leaders as an individual. So it's about stepping up and saying, I'm being accountable for my own behavior, But guess what? I'm going to hold everyone else responsible for that. This is something I'm so passionate about because I have worked in endless organizations where you have somebody who's really great at their job. I mean, really great at their job. But the impact that they have on the people around them, that's not so great. And they never get picked up on it.
A little toxic, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. So the excuses have been made for people that, yeah, you can have that impact. You can be toxic to the people around you because you're good at your job. Well, if DEI is going to be in the hands of leaders, we can't have that. If we're talking about inclusive, safe working cultures, yes, you need to be good at your job. But yes, you need to be thinking about the impact you're having on those around you.
That is well said. And I'm curious, besides behavioral considerations, what else are you seeing or predicting that we'll see leaders practicing as it pertains to DEI?
I think that leaders really need to think about their position and what they're bringing to it. A lot of leaders have gone into their role because they care about people and they care about the potential of their people. So they need to recognize that in their role, they have a huge influence on the organization. And it's about our leaders using whatever privilege that they have to ensure that all boats are rising with the tide. It's about actively questioning promotion and succession planning. It's about thinking, who are your underrepresented people who are absolutely fantastic, but they don't have the visibility or they don't have the status? It's about proactively creating opportunities to delegate responsibility, to sponsor mentorship programs and get that spotlight shining. It's recognizing that if your organization has, I'll say, inadvertently closed a door, then go and be the window opener.
So that's an interesting term. I've not heard that before. Tell me more about this concept of inadvertent door closing and how leaders might find themselves up against this.
I am a half full glass person, but I don't believe there are many people in the organization that intentionally set out to exclude people. But what we do recognize is that there are a number of senior leadership teams that are quite homogenous. And that means that there isn't always the diversity of thought to challenge any sort of group biases or unconscious shortcuts that's been agreed. So it's thinking about, if you're making a decision, is everybody of the same mindset? Who is this going to impact? So, this is that door closing moment. If not thought about it, you may not be able to reopen that door, but you could open a window. And with that window, new thoughts could come through or different perspectives. So, it's really about leaders connecting their personal values and their professional responsibilities. We've said about model the behaviors. Yes. Have inclusive practice as the forefront of every conversation. Yes. But I think in terms of that window opening idea, you need to help others understand why on earth inclusion's important in the first place. Because if people don't understand the need for it, they're never going to embrace it. So it's a case of helping people understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. And I say it's about turning up the volume and quietening the noise, because we need to address a lot of misconceptions when it comes to inclusive practice and DEI. I saw the most horrific breakdown of what DEI stood for on some social media feeds the other day, and it was didn't earn it. And it made my blood boil because that is not what this stands for. DEI efforts are not about unfairly rewarding people because of their race or their gender. It's about skills and contributions, innovation and evolution. So, yes, that's pretty much my soapbox rant.
I love that. That really helps me with that term inadvertent door closing, because one of the things that hit me, and this was maybe even a decade ago, was this idea that in every human, there are talents, God given things that maybe come a little more naturally to you. If you look at it that way, and you might not have the perfect background or experience, but if you are a leader and you're saying, I'm going to open up coaching opportunities or mentoring opportunities, and then you're talking about a performance advantage for your organization. And I love that. And incidentally, as a plug for some of our past podcasts over the past couple of months, if you want to check back on the Performance Matters podcast, we have some coaching and AI integration podcasts that really are working seamlessly what Nick's talking about in terms of that opportunity to very strategically, tactically open doors for your organization. So I invite you to check those out. Now, Nick, one thing you also mentioned was this idea of aligning your personal values with professional responsibility. So I'd love if you'd share a little more about your perspective on that.
I think this is one of the hardest things that leaders are going to experience as they start to own the inclusion agenda, especially in some regions of the world where there's going to be quite a heavy influence to move away from certain practices. And I guess it's about recognizing your own moral compass. It's thinking about what can we do that isn't just doing things right, but it's about doing the right thing. Don't be the organizational cheerleader if something isn't right. People will see straight through that. Use your influence, use your insights to recalibrate a conversation. If something is being introduced or something is being taken away and it doesn't sit right with your own moral compass, have the conversation. It could be that, again, a decision was made in a team that didn't have that diversity of thought. The intent wasn't bad, but somebody has missed the opportunity to have the conversation and say, do we recognize the impact of what this is going to cause? Be the person who presses the pause button and just goes, okay, let's think about how we're showing up with this. So be authentic, use your insights, use your compass, and recognize that there's going to be a lot of upheaval for people in the coming year. So it's helping them move from that sense of loss into that place of potential gain.
That's great insight. And it sounds like from what you're saying, despite all the noise in the media and certain political perspectives out there, it sounds like you're saying 82% of leaders are seeing past the noise anyway and saying, yeah, I see what somebody's bluster is or a particular movement. We're going to continue on this because we're seeing differences and benefits on that end. And that kind of dovetails to the next question I have on my list for you. And that is very specifically, how can leaders know if their efforts are making a difference? Like, what are some of the brass tacks indicators, leading indicators that you recommend that they can either look for or maybe discuss putting in place?
Okay. So earlier on in the conversation, I sort of mentioned about being our own echo chamber. And what we tend to do is think we're really great at something, but we don't seek out the feedback. You know, whether there is something in ourselves that is a little anxious about hearing other people's experiences, or maybe we're a little bit arrogant about it and we don't think we need to hear it because we're doing a great job. Both are very real experiences for leaders. But what I would say is we can't make a difference. We can't grow. We can't change the culture if we aren't measuring our practice. So, as uncomfortable as some people might find it, you really need to think about how you're going to measure your performance. Maybe you set it as an objective. All of my team have an inclusion objective. And that is something we talk about every quarter in terms of, but what have you done to grow your people? Because whether you're signed up to the idea of DEI and woke and everything else or not, the bit that you have signed up to in your role is getting the best out of your people. So having that as an objective just keeps that at that forefront. It makes it tangible. So when you're thinking about measurement with inclusive practice, you've got things like your engagement stats. You've got your talent pipeline, you've got your quarterly reviews. And if you're really brave, go out and do some 360 feedback as well, because I tell you what, that is the most humbling experience you can do, because you are getting people's true thoughts and true value. And you may even learn something fantastic about yourself whilst doing it. So capture it all, because if your teams aren't seeing it, if you're not measuring it, it may not be having the impact when you offset it against the effort.
Oh, I love that. Those are some great specifics. And I will say, as someone who has been a leader, I remember specifically, it's hard to believe 5 years ago during the heart of the pandemic, we did a 360 feedback and I heard some pretty tough things from some of my staff. Specifically, they were saying, we're having a really tough time right now. And I don't know if you've gathered this, Nick, but I tend to lean on my humor a little bit. And they were saying, you know what, can you ease up on that during status meetings and things? Because we're quite frankly struggling right now. Those are hard things for me to personally hear. I'm being vulnerable right now with you, as it was hard to hear that. But at the same point, that was very valuable to say, you need to turn up the empathy wick and hear and honor your staff. Specifically, we want to get the best out of people. We want them to have their best days at work here at GP Strategies, and you got to listen to your people. So those are very valuable. Any last words on the topic here? You've been very generous with your time already, Nick.
I'd say that the last thing, we are going to get to the point where inclusive leadership is the norm. Like, we're not going to be talking about leadership in DEI in the way that we don't talk about leadership in emotional intelligence or leadership in trust. But in the meantime, I do, of course, recognize that there is pushback felt by leaders, felt by DEI practitioners, HR members. So my advice is, whilst we're pushing for this to become the norm and whilst you're practicing out those behaviors, seek out your community. Collaborate with people to brainstorm ideas and to strategize how to overcome elements of resistance, how to align your personal values with those moments when your professional responsibility may be challenging them. Really think about what you can do to harness the humanosity of the organization, because you're not alone in doing that.
Great last words. We appreciate your time, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So we just had a great conversation with Nick. If you haven't checked out gpstrategies.com, highly encourage you to check out our website. If you go onto our homepage and click our solutions, you will be amazed at the vast array of learning services, talent transformation services we have. Now, Nick is part of our leadership and DEI training practice. I encourage you to check that out. If you want to get in touch with Nick or any of the others, gpstrategies.com is the place to start the conversation. In the meantime, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to many more sessions, many more learning sessions in the coming months. The Performance Matters podcast is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can subscribe to the show anywhere you get podcasts or listen on our website at gpstrategies.com.